Master Sergeant, with all due respect, this level of strategic coordination is for commissioned officers. Perhaps you could ensure the coffee station is adequately supplied? We wouldn't want the colonels to go without. The words, slick with condescending charm, dripped from Major Carlton Vance's lips and hung in the sterile, chilled air of the command conference room. The small group of junior officers, all eager lieutenants and captains orbiting the major's self-appointed son, offered a few sycophantic snickers. They were weak, nervous sounds, the kind of laughter that seeks permission before it fully escapes. It was a pathetic chorus validating an equally pathetic solo. In the center of their derision sat Master Sergeant Eva Rostova. She did not flinch. She did not sigh. Her posture, a ramrod of disciplined stillness, remained unaltered. Her gaze, fixed on the holographic display at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, did not flicker. Her hand, steady and sure, simply continued its silent dance across the surface of her datapad, making a precise annotation in a digital file labeled Ceremony Logistics. Phase 4. She offered no verbal response, no defensive posture, no acknowledgement that she had even been addressed beyond a single, almost imperceptible nod that could have meant anything. It was this silence, this profound and unnerving calm, that was her true response. It was a silence more articulate than any retort, a void into which Major Vance's arrogance tumbled and was lost. He had expected a flustered apology, a nervous shuffle, perhaps even a defiant glare he could then crush with the weight of his rank. He received nothing. He received a professional, engrossed in her work, for whom his verbal posturing was no more significant than the hum of the building's ventilation system. But across the room, observing from the back corner where the shadows clung to the walls, sat Colonel Davies, the base's deputy commander. He wasn't watching the peacocking major. He was watching the master sergeant. He saw not a clerk, but a statue of composure. He noted the way she held her datapad, not cradled like a piece of office equipment, but gripped with the practiced familiarity of a tool or a weapon. He saw the utter lack of wasted motion in her every gesture, and a memory, distant and vague, began to stir in the back of his mind. A briefing he'd attended years ago about a new breed of soldier, the ones who fought their wars not in the mud and sand, but in the silent, invisible world of signals and code. They were the ghosts, the whispers in the machine. They looked like anyone. They looked like everyone. They looked, he thought with a growing sense of unease for the major, exactly like Master Sergeant Rostova. If you believe that true strength is measured in silence and proven in action, type competence in the comments below, because the loudest voice in a room is often the most ignorant, and a storm of unbelievable skill was about to make landfall in this very conference room, leaving nothing but shocked silence in its wake. The condescension from Major Vance did not abate. It festered, growing more pronounced as the hours wore on. He treated Master Sergeant Rostova not as a fellow professional, but as a piece of furniture that occasionally needed to be instructed. "Sergeant, the projection is misaligned by 2 degrees. See to it," he'd command without looking at her. "Sergeant, cross-reference these seating charts with the protocol list from the general's office, and do it yesterday." Each order was a small, public assertion of his dominance, a continuous effort to reinforce the hierarchy he had established in his own mind. The junior officers, taking their cue from him, began to ignore her presence entirely, stepping around her as if she were an inconveniently placed coat rack. Through it all, Rostova remained a placid lake in a hurricane of ego. She executed each task with a quiet, methodical precision that was almost unnerving. The projection was realigned not to 2 degrees, but to a perfect 0-0 calibration. The seating charts were cross-referenced and returned with 3 potential protocol conflicts flagged and solutions proposed, a level of analytical foresight that went completely over Vance's head. He simply saw the task as completed and moved on, blind to the mastery behind the execution. He was a man who could only recognize the sound of thunder, utterly deaf to the subtle, powerful buildup of atmospheric pressure that precedes the storm. Her uniform was immaculate, the creases sharp enough to cut paper, yet it seemed to render her invisible to him. It was a standard-issue uniform, devoid of the flashy commendations and skill badges that many career soldiers accumulate. To Vance, a man who judged a book by its gilded cover, her lack of adornment was a sign of an unremarkable career. He failed to comprehend that for some, the most significant awards are the ones that can never be worn, the ones documented only in black-inked files locked away in subterranean vaults. Her physical presence contributed to his dismissiveness. She was not tall, nor was she physically imposing. She was built with a lean economy, a testament to efficiency over brute force. Vance, a former college athlete who still spent 2 hours a day in the gym cultivating his presence, saw this as frailty. He could not conceive of the lethal strength that resides in disciplined stillness, the power coiled within a mind that has been honed into a weapon of surgical precision. And so, the meeting dragged on, a monument to his vanity. He pontificated on leadership, on tradition, on the importance of appearance for the upcoming Distinguished Service Cross ceremony, all the while oblivious to the fact that the living embodiment of the service and sacrifice the medal represented was sitting 10 feet away from him, silently ensuring the ceremony would actually function. The injustice was a palpable thing, a thickness in the air that only Colonel Davies seemed to truly sense, his frown deepening with every dismissive command the Major issued. The other officers were too caught up in their own careers, too intimidated by Vance's rank and political connections, to intervene. They became complicit through their silence, a different, weaker kind of silence than the one Rostova wielded with such profound strength. The crisis arrived not with a bang, but with a screech. A high-pitched, electronic wail tore through the conference room, followed by a cascade of catastrophic failures. The main holographic display, which had been showing the intricate seating chart for the dignitaries, dissolved into a blizzard of static before going utterly black. The side monitors, displaying logistical data and timelines, flickered erratically and died one by one, their final act a sad, popping sound. The room's smart lighting system defaulted to a harsh, emergency-level brightness, bathing the panicked faces of the officers in an unflattering, sterile glare. A faint, acrid smell, the ghost of burnt ozone, began to snake its way from the central control console. The Aegis Command Suite, the multi-million-dollar nerve center for the entire base's ceremonial and command functions, was dead. Panic, cold and sharp, erupted. Major Vance's carefully constructed composure shattered into 1,000 pieces. "What is that? What's happening?" he yelled, his voice cracking. He stabbed a finger at the 2 civilian contractors who had been lounging in the back of the room. "You, fix this. Fix it now." The contractors, a pair of men whose confidence far outstripped their competence, rushed to the console. They tapped at the dark screens, rebooted terminals, and muttered a stream of technical jargon that was meant to sound impressive but only conveyed their own cluelessness. "It's a core kernel panic, sir," one of them said, sweat beading on his forehead. "The primary matrix has lost sync with the legacy hardware drivers. We'd have to rebuild the entire OS from the ground up. It'll take days, maybe a week days." The ceremony was tomorrow morning. The arrival of a 4-star general and half a dozen other dignitaries was imminent. This was not just an inconvenience. It was a colossal, career-ending failure, and it was happening on Major Vance's watch. His face went pale, the blood draining from it as the full scope of the disaster settled upon him. He began shouting orders, his voice a frantic bark. "Get the engineers. Call the manufacturer. I want a team from headquarters on a plane tonight. I will not have this ceremony derailed." His tirade was a frantic dance of blame shifting, a desperate attempt to create a flurry of activity that might obscure the central truth. He was helpless. He had no solution. Amidst this chaos, Master Sergeant Rostova moved. She did not ask for permission. She did not announce her intentions. She simply stood, her chair making no sound on the carpeted floor, and walked with a calm, deliberate stride toward the dead console. Her movements were a stark contrast to the frantic scurrying of the contractors and the histrionics of the Major. She moved like a surgeon approaching an operating table, her focus absolute, the surrounding panic fading into an irrelevant background hum. She placed her datapad on a side table, and from her simple, unassuming bag, she produced a small, rolled-up toolkit. It was not standard issue. The tools within were sleek, specialized, and bore the marks of custom fabrication. Vance, momentarily pausing his rant, finally noticed her. "What in God's name do you think you're doing, Sergeant?" he sneered, his fear transmuting back into its default state of arrogance. "This is a multi-million-dollar system, not a broken toaster. Step away before you do more damage." Rostova's hands, however, were already at work, her focus unbroken. Master Sergeant Rostova completely ignored him. Her world had compressed to the silent, dark interface of the Aegis console. Her fingers, nimble and sure, unlatched a small, unmarked panel below the main screen, revealing a series of diagnostic ports that the civilian contractors hadn't even known existed. From her kit, she selected a slender, custom-built interface cable and connected it to her datapad. The screen of her tablet, previously displaying logistical charts, was now a stark black field, illuminated only by a single, blinking green cursor. A command line interface. To the other officers, it was an incomprehensible relic of a bygone computing era. To Rostova, it was home. Her fingers began to move across the virtual keyboard, a blur of motion that was both impossibly fast and perfectly precise. There were no typos, no hesitations. It was a fluid, rhythmic dance of pure muscle memory and profound understanding. Streams of white and green code began to scroll up the screen at a dizzying speed. She was not running a simple diagnostic. She was performing open-heart surgery on the system's soul. She dove deep into the machine's BIOS, bypassing the corrupted operating system entirely. With a few sharp commands, she isolated the faulty driver files that had caused the initial crash, quarantining them in a partitioned sector of the hard drive. Major Vance watched, his mouth slightly agape, a sarcastic remark dying on his lips. He didn't understand what he was seeing, but he could recognize a level of expertise so far beyond his comprehension that it felt like magic. The civilian techs peered over her shoulder, their expressions shifting from skepticism to disbelief, and finally, to pure, unadulterated awe. "She's not just rebooting," one whispered to the other, his voice trembling slightly. "She's writing a patch, on the fly, for a proprietary military-grade OS. That's not possible." Rostova's work continued, relentless and silent. She rerouted primary system functions, established new communication protocols between the hardware and software, and then, in an act of sheer digital brilliance, she began to build a virtual machine within the system's own memory. She was constructing a clean, stable environment to run the ceremony's presentation files, completely bypassing the damaged sections of the core OS. It was the digital equivalent of building a state-of-the-art bridge over a collapsed canyon in under 5 minutes. The rhythmic clicking of her virtual keyboard was the only sound in the now silent room. All eyes were fixed on her, on the mesmerizing flow of code on her datapad. Then, with a final decisive keystroke, she stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Vance started to open his mouth, a cynical well forming on his lips. And then it happened. With a soft, electronic chime, the main holographic display flickered to life. It didn't just turn on. It cycled through a full-spectrum color calibration with a speed and clarity it had never possessed before. The side monitors activated in perfect unison, their displays crisp and stable. The harsh emergency lights softened, dimming to the pre-programmed ceremonial settings. The audio system emitted a clear, perfect tone, indicating it was online and ready. The Aegis command suite was not just fixed. It was better. It was faster, more stable, more responsive. Rostova had not only repaired the damage, she had fundamentally improved the entire system. She calmly disconnected her cable, closed the hidden panel, and packed her small toolkit away. She picked up her datapad and turned to face the room of stunned, speechless men. Her expression was unchanged. It was calm, professional, and utterly unreadable. She looked at Major Vance, her gaze level and direct, and uttered her first words to him in over an hour. "The system is operational, sir." The silence that followed her statement was absolute. It was a heavy, profound silence, a vacuum created by the sudden, violent extinction of arrogance and panic. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the faint, steady hum of the now perfectly functioning Aegis system. The civilian contractors stared at the console, then at Rostova, their faces a mixture of awe and professional shame. The junior officers looked from their speechless major to the quiet master sergeant, their worldviews visibly recalibrating in real time. Major Vance's face was a canvas of conflicting emotions. Shock was dominant, his jaw hanging slack. But beneath it was a dawning, horrifying wave of humiliation, the kind that washes over a person when they realize they have not just been wrong, but monumentally, publicly, and unforgivably wrong. He stammered, the word catching in his throat. "How? Who? What did you just do?" Before Rostova could offer one of her characteristically brief, technical replies, the conference room doors swished open. The atmosphere in the room, already thick with tension, instantly solidified. In the doorway stood General Marcus Thorne. He was a man whose presence filled a room before he even took a full step inside. A 4-star general, commander of the entire theater of operations, Thorne was a living legend. He carried his 60 years with an easy authority, his eyes missing nothing, his face a roadmap of command decisions made in places most people only read about. His gaze swept the room, instantly assessing the scene. The pale, shell-shocked major, the awestruck contractors, the nervous junior officers, and the utterly composed master sergeant standing beside the now glowing console. He didn't need a report to know that he had walked into the aftermath of a crisis and its resolution. Major Vance. His voice was quiet, yet it carried the weight of 4 stars and a lifetime of command. "Report. I was told my ceremony was in jeopardy." Vance snapped to attention, his body moving by instinct, his mind still reeling. He fumbled for words, his usual eloquence deserting him entirely. "General, sir, we had a catastrophic system failure. The Aegis suite crashed. The contractors, they said it was unrecoverable in the time frame. Sir," he gestured vaguely at the console, then at Rostova. "But Master Sergeant Rostova, she fixed it, sir." I don't know how General Thorne's eyes settled on Rostova. He studied her for a long moment. There was no flicker of recognition in his eyes, but he saw something more important. He saw the same quiet, unwavering confidence he had seen in the very best operators he had ever commanded. The ones who didn't talk about what they could do, they simply did it. He recognized the archetype. He recognized the quiet professional. He turned his head slightly toward his executive aide, a young but sharp-as-a-tack captain. "Captain, pull up the service record from Master Sergeant Eva Rostova. All of it. Authorize Omega-level clearance for voice dissemination. Read it aloud to the room." The captain's eyes widened almost imperceptibly at the command. Omega-level clearance was reserved for the most sensitive personnel files in the entire military, files that were typically sealed under layers of classification so thick that most generals never even knew they existed. It was a verbal command that carried the weight of a presidential decree. He quickly tapped on his secure datapad, his fingers flying across the encrypted interface. A few seconds later, he looked up, his expression one of profound astonishment. He cleared his throat, and the entire room seemed to lean in, holding its collective breath. "Reading file for Master Sergeant Rostova. Eva," the captain began, his voice now laced with a reverence that bordered on fear. "Primary military occupational specialty, 25D, Cyber Network Defender. Secondary and tertiary specialties, classified. Redacted. Redacted." A murmur went through the room. Vance's face grew even paler. The captain continued, his voice growing stronger, more deliberate, with each shocking revelation. "Unit of assignment, United States Army Cyber Command, attached to Joint Special Operations Command Technical Support Element. Redacted, The mention of JSOC hit the room like a physical blow. It was the pinnacle, the secret world of Tier 1 operations. The idea that this quiet, unassuming woman was part of that universe was simply beyond the comprehension of anyone present, save for the general. Significant operational history, the captain read on. Operation Ghostfire, lead cyber warfare technician. Operation Iron Dagger, network exploitation specialist. Operation Silent Hammer, senior technical surveillance countermeasures lead. 14 declared combat zone deployments. All details classified. The captain paused, swallowing hard before reading the final section. Awards and commendations. Army Commendation Medal with C device. Bronze Star Medal with V device for valor. Silver Star for actions during Operation Ghostfire. He took another deep breath. Nomination for the Distinguished Service Cross for extreme gallantry during Operation Silent Hammer. Currently pending final review board, the words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The medal. The very medal this entire, elaborate ceremony was for. The medal that had been held up for months by a bureaucratic committee, bogged down by members who, like Vance, likely couldn't reconcile the paper reports of impossible digital heroism with the image of the quiet NCO they thought they knew. The puzzle pieces slammed into place with brutal clarity. The specialized tools. The impossible speed with the code. The unnerving calm under pressure. It wasn't just a skilled technician. She was a warrior from a new kind of battlefield, a digital ghost who hunted in the dark corners of the modern world. General Thorne let the silence sit for a moment, allowing the full weight of the revelation to crush the ignorance that had filled the room just minutes before. Then he moved. He walked past the petrified Major Vance, his boots making no sound on the floor. He stopped directly in front of Master Sergeant Rostova, who had instinctively straightened to the position of attention. The general looked at her, and in his eyes there was a profound, unmistakable respect, the look of one true warrior acknowledging another. He did not salute. He did something far more significant. He looked at Major Vance, his voice cold and sharp as chipped ice. "Major, you are relieved of all duties pertaining to this ceremony. Your new assignment is to reflect on the difference between assumption and reality. Master Sergeant Rostova is now in charge. From this moment forward, her voice is my voice. Her orders are my orders. Every person in this room will give her the same respect and obedience they would give to me. Is that understood?" The general's words echoed in the stunned silence, each one a hammer blow shattering the established hierarchy of the room. The transfer of authority was instantaneous, absolute, and brutal in its efficiency. The mantle of command settled onto Master Sergeant Rostova's shoulders not with a bang, but with a quiet, profound gravity. She didn't change her expression. She didn't puff out her chest. She simply absorbed the responsibility as she had absorbed the insults, with a silent, professional grace that was more commanding than any shout could ever be. Major Vance, his face a mask of utter mortification, could only manage a choked, "Yes, General." Understood. It was the voice of a man who had not only lost control of the situation, but had also lost control of his own narrative. His identity as the confident, decisive leader had been publicly dismantled piece by piece. He was now subordinate to the very person he had dismissed as a coffee fetcher. The lesson was as cruel as it was necessary. General Thorne gave a curt nod, then turned his full attention back to Rostova. "Master Sergeant," he said, his tone shifting from the ice of command to the warmth of genuine respect. "Get this ceremony ready. Whatever you need, you have. My staff is your staff." Rostova met his gaze, and for the first time, spoke with more than a few words. "Thank you, General. We will be ready." "Captain Miller," she said, turning to one of the young officers who had snickered earlier, her voice calm and even, "I need a full diagnostic report on the primary power grid's redundancy loop. Have it on my data pad in 5 minutes." The captain, jolted by the direct order, snapped to attention so fast he almost stumbled. "Yes, Master Sergeant," he barked, his face flushed with a mixture of fear and newfound respect, before practically running from the room. Rostova then turned to the two civilian contractors. Your access is revoked. I've reset the admin passwords. A security detail will escort you out. Your company will be contacted regarding the breach of your service contract. The contractors, who had been trying to make themselves as small as possible, simply nodded. Their awe now replaced by the grim understanding that they were utterly out of their league. One by one, Rostova began to issue orders. They were concise, technically precise, and left no room for ambiguity. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her authority was derived not from the volume of her words, but from the undeniable depth of her competence. The remaining officers, including Major Vance, became her instruments. They moved with a speed and purpose they had not displayed under the Major's blustering command. Vance himself was tasked with the menial job of physically verifying the inventory of ceremonial flags, a task he had tried to delegate to Rostova just hours before. The irony was thick enough to taste. He accepted the order with a clipped, "Yes, Master Sergeant," the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The story of what happened in that conference room did not leak. It exploded. It traveled through the base's gossip network at the speed of light, transmitted in hushed whispers in chow halls, in encrypted messages between NCOs, and in knowing glances exchanged between staff members. The narrative was intoxicating. The arrogant officer, the quiet NCO who was secretly a ghost from the Spec Ops world, the dramatic reveal by the four-star general. It was the stuff of military legend. Within hours, Master Sergeant Eva Rostova became a myth. They called her the ghost of the command center, or the Aegis Whisperer. Junior enlisted personnel would subtly alter their paths just to walk by the conference room, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had humbled a major and bent a multi-million-dollar computer system to her will with nothing but a datapad and a set of custom tools. The legend served as a powerful corrective. The culture of casual condescension toward unassuming personnel, especially those in technical fields, evaporated overnight. NCOs walked a little taller. Officers, particularly the younger ones, suddenly started listening more than they talked, their eyes scanning the ranks for the next quiet professional they might have overlooked. Major Vance, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale. His public humbling was complete. He performed the tasks assigned to him by Rostova with a grim, robotic efficiency. He counted flags. He organized name cards. He supervised the polishing of brass. Each menial task was a fresh reminder of his colossal misjudgment. There was a moment, late in the evening, when he found himself alone in a hallway with Rostova as she was reviewing a power consumption schematic on her datapad. He cleared his throat, the sound loud in the quiet corridor. "Master Sergeant," he began, his voice low and strained. I wanted to apologize for my conduct. It was unprofessional and unacceptable." Rostova didn't look up from her screen. For a long moment, she said nothing. Vance waited, bracing himself for a reprimand, a dismissal, anything. Finally, without lifting her eyes, she said, "The secondary generator is showing a 2% power fluctuation. I want it physically inspected and the report filed within the hour. Major." She then walked past him, her focus already on the next problem. The message was clear. His apology was irrelevant. His feelings were irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was the mission. The past was a closed book. The future was a series of tasks to be executed to perfection. It was the most brutal and most effective absolution he could have received. She wasn't interested in his shame. She was interested in his compliance. The lesson sunk deeper than any verbal lashing could have. The ceremony preparations, under her command, became a symphony of quiet efficiency. Problems were identified and solved before they could escalate. Timelines were met and exceeded. A sense of calm, professional purpose settled over the entire team. Rostova was the calm center of it all, a silent conductor leading an orchestra that had, just that morning, been a cacophony of panicked noise. The ceremony itself was flawless. The lights, the sound, the holographic displays, all performed in perfect harmony, a silent testament to the master who had rebuilt them. When the time came for the presentation of the Distinguished Service Cross, the announcer's voice boomed through the auditorium. And now, for extreme gallantry and service to the nation. Master Sergeant Eva Rostova, a wave of thunderous applause filled the hall. As she walked to the stage, crisp and composed, every person in that room, from the lowest-ranking airman to the colonels in the front row, knew they were witnessing more than just an award presentation. They were witnessing the validation of a principle. General Thorne personally took the medal. As he pinned it to her chest, he leaned in close, his voice a low whisper meant only for her. "They told me you were good," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "They had no idea. Thank you for your service, Sergeant." A single photograph captured that moment. The unassuming Master Sergeant, her face calm and stoic, and the four-star general, his expression one of profound, unreserved admiration. That photo would soon be hanging on the wall of heroes at command headquarters. A permanent symbol of the day, quiet competence put loud arrogance firmly in its place. Months melted into a year, but the legacy of that day did not fade. It crystallized, becoming part of the institutional folklore of the base. The story was passed down from one generation of service members to the next, a standard part of the orientation for new lieutenants and a favorite cautionary tale shared by grizzled senior NCOs in their break rooms. "Remember Vance and the Ghost," they'd say. "Rank gives you authority, not a monopoly on knowledge. Never assume the quietest person in the room has the least to say." The Rostova Protocol became a common slang term, used to describe a situation where a complex, seemingly impossible problem was suddenly and silently solved by an overlooked expert. To have a problem Rostovid was the ultimate compliment, a testament to elegant, efficient, and ego-free problem-solving. The physical reminders were there, too. The Aegis Command Suite, once a source of constant frustration, now ran with an almost supernatural stability. The custom patches and virtual architecture Rostova had built in those few frantic minutes had become the new standard, studied by engineers from the Pentagon who were baffled by its elegant simplicity and robust performance. They tried to contact her for consultation, but she was, as always, gone, assigned to another classified task in another part of the world, a digital phantom leaving only the evidence of her passage behind. And what of Major Vance? He was not ruined. The military, in its wisdom, often understands that a lesson learned through profound humility is more valuable than punishment. He was transferred not to a dead-end post, but to a training command. He was a changed man. The arrogant, verbose officer was gone, replaced by a quieter, more thoughtful leader. He was observed, on numerous occasions, pulling aside young NCOs and specialists, listening intently to their opinions, actively seeking out the knowledge that existed in the ranks below him. He became one of the most effective instructors at the academy, his favorite lecture titled, "The Dangers of the First Impression." He never told the full story of his own humiliation, but he used his experience as a crucible to forge better officers, teaching them the one lesson that had been burned into his soul, that the insignia on a collar is merely a symbol of responsibility, not a measure of worth. He was teaching them to look for the Eva Rostovas of the world, to value the quiet competence that wins wars, builds nations, and saves ceremonies. The ultimate legacy of Master Sergeant Eva Rostova was not in the flawless system she left behind or the humbled major she inadvertently mentored. It was in the subtle but profound shift in perspective she inspired. She was a living reminder that the true strength of any organization lies not in its figureheads, but in its foundation, in the quiet professionals who, without fanfare or need for recognition, simply do the work. They're the master sergeants who can rewrite the soul of a machine, the junior medics who can hold a life together with tape and courage, the logistics specialists who can move mountains with a datapad and a force of will. They seek no glory, for their reward is the successful completion of the mission. Their pride is not in the medals they wear, but in the standards they uphold. Rostova's silence had been mistaken for meekness, her unassuming nature for a lack of experience. But her silence was not emptiness. It was the calm, disciplined quiet of a master craftsman at the bench. It was the focused silence of a surgeon in the operating theater. It was the patient silence of a sniper on the ridgeline. It was a silence born of absolute confidence in her own abilities, a confidence so profound that it required no external validation, no shouted proclamations, no polished ego. It was the kind of confidence that can only be earned in the crucibles of real-world crises, in those moments where there is no audience and no applause, only a problem that must be solved. Her story became a parable, teaching a timeless truth, that assumptions are the enemy of wisdom, and arrogance is a self-inflicted blindness. True authority is not seized. It is granted by those who recognize superior skill and unwavering integrity. Respect is not a right of rank. It is a debt owed to demonstrated competence. In a world that grows ever louder, filled with voices shouting for attention, her legacy is a powerful counter-narrative. It champions the quiet, the focused, the humble. It reminds us that the most significant contributions often come from the people we notice the least, and that the most powerful voice in any room is often the one that waits until the talking is done and then, with a few precise actions, changes everything. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, and where silent dedication defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.